We'll now move on to part 3 of the training, focused on general observation items, so those that don't happen chronologically through the day, as well as the document review of written materials that the center provides. So moving along within the observation, section G is titled Activities in General for Today. And in this section, what you'll do, this is a section that you'll flip to a little bit on and off throughout the day. What we have here is a list of commonly observed gross motor movements that are broken up into the morning and the afternoon. So we're looking for the presence of these movements in order to gauge the quality of the indoor space and how it can support gross motor activity. Typically, when we think about these different movements, we're thinking about them in terms of the sets of big muscles that they're using. So if you see something that happens that doesn't exactly map onto what we have in these categories, just try to map it onto where you think it fits best in terms of whether it's a combination of arms and core movements or more leg-based movements and things like that. So however it can map onto similar to how the movement recruits similar sets of muscle groups. A couple of the things that we're looking at here, we don't capture in things like hit or punch. We don't capture people in that. So these are things like hitting a ball or punching a pillow or something like that. That is not another person. A few of them to point out that are a little bit are not exactly intuitive. When we think about lifting, if you look at that one under P, also they're listed in alphabetical order for your ease of finding things. Lift would be lifting something heavy enough that they're actually putting in some heft. So this would be lifting a heavy box and either lifting it, above the child's head or lifting it and carrying it a certain distance throughout the classroom. Roll and so if you look at flip and roll, those are a little bit different. Flip is like a somersault, so head over heels, whereas roll we think about if you're rolling down a hill, so you're like a hot dog roll down the hill. And these could happen anywhere inside, whether it's the classroom or if they use another area for their gross motor activity or physical activity, the hallway, another gym or something like that. It can happen anywhere, but it's just inside, not thinking about outside. And when we're looking for this, we're just looking for one child to do it, and that's enough. So when you're observing kind of more of those just general play periods in the classroom, this is a good time to scan the classroom and see if any of these activities are occurring. Section H has a lot of questions about the equipment, environment, and space relative to nutrition and physical activity. The first question is also asking about the indoor spaces. We want to know where children are allowed to participate in active play. So is this just the classroom? Is the classroom so small that it doesn't have any room for children to be moderately active at all? If so, you would mark no space. But if they can be active in the classroom, we want to know that, or whether it's another gym or a multi-purpose room, another classroom, the hallway, or some other sort of room that you can specify there. We want to know if that was used. And then overall, we want to have a rating of that space on a 5-point scale that's listed below. And you can put the rating in the box that's in the third column of the H1 questions. And this is thinking about the total number of children that are in the classroom, the size of the space, so the classroom or the hallway or something, and how much unobstructed play space is there. So is there a big open space in the middle of the room, or is it sectioned off in terms of bookshelves and other sorts of furniture to make to create obstructions within the classroom where they couldn't run around freely for a sustained period of time? We also want to know if the indoor play spaces have separate play areas for each group. This is often inherent within centers. So this is thinking about infants, toddlers, young preschoolers, and older preschoolers are those age groups separated out into different spaces. And oftentimes this happens to be the case automatically because they're in separate classrooms. But there are some centers where everyone, especially if they're smaller centers, where all the kids are in one classroom altogether. So that would be an example of a scenario where there are not separate play areas, but most of the time we see that there are. We also want to know if there are areas within the indoor play spaces that allow for a variety of group sizes within their play spaces. So individual children to play, small groups to play, and large groups to play. So if you see those happening throughout the day, that's evidence that that play space can support that. We also want to know if there are accommodations for children with special needs, and this includes any sort of special needs, but what we're thinking about here is, are the play spaces physically accessible to those children? So are there ledges and stairs and things like that that would make children who have a walker or a wheelchair or something like that not to be able to access those play spaces? We also take note of the items in the play kitchen, and this could be done at any point during your observation. I typically think about doing it at a time where the children are not in that area. So I'll oftentimes do this during circle time or something where the children are in a different part of the classroom. But you can take note of what you see children playing with and mark those as being there, and then do a more thorough audit once they're not in there. Also, before I go through anything in a classroom, I always just check to make sure it's okay with the teacher that I do so. I've never had a problem with that before, but we do want to be respectful and not just go rummaging through their belongings without asking them if that's okay. For the play kitchen, what we're looking for here are kind of those bigger groups that we measure within the EPAO sections. So beverages, lean proteins, higher fat proteins, dairy, different grain products, fruits, vegetables, and then a couple other things like canned goods, commercial fast food items. So that would be items that are easily recognizable as being from a fast food location. And if there are other items that come up, you can write them in. Things like more culturally diverse foods pop up a lot in North Carolina these days because they get points for that within their licensing. So we often see things like sushi and other sorts of foods like that. Also within this section, we want to know both indoors and outdoors where the drinking water is located and how accessible it is to children. So both indoors and outdoors, is it coming from a faucet, a drinking fountain, a pitcher or a water cooler? So that's where children would have to serve themselves or be served by an adult, or do they have individual bottles? At least in North Carolina, we are seeing more of the individual bottles model these days. So that's each child has their individual bottle with their name on it that they can use both indoors and outdoors. We also ask if water is ever restricted indoors or outdoors, and this would be the scenario where a child asked to have some water and the teacher or other caregiver specifically said no or said that they had to wait. If that happened, then you would mark yes, but we assume no until we hear otherwise, or it's indicated to the observer otherwise. We also want to know how many books and then posters and pictures there are that encourage either healthy or unhealthy nutrition or physical activity behaviors. So these are things, when you're thinking about children's programming, so for books and then posters and things like that, the message is going to be pretty obvious to you as an adult looking at these things. They're meant to be pretty hit you on the head with these messages. There can be a lot of books in different spaces throughout the classroom, so make sure that you're looking in all parts of the classroom and not just on whatever bookshelf they have, but there could be more in different centers. So take note. What I usually do is go through and look at the titles. So look at the spine of the book as they're on the bookshelf, or just kind of breeze through the front of the book if they're in a bigger stack. And you can look at the titles and see, does this have anything to do with food, physical activity, or is it a TV or movie character? If so, flag it, put it aside, and then take a look and actually open up the book and see what it's about. You can kind of get a different feel for something by looking at the title versus looking at the whole book altogether. With this, we're not looking for things where there's an apple on one page of the book and that is then promoting healthy eating. We're looking for a bulk of the message or a bulk of the focus of the story to be on a healthy food or an unhealthy food or something like that. We also want to know generally how many books and then posters or pictures there are within the classroom. And here we've given categorical responses. We don't need to know exactly how many, but just to get a feel for the scope, we give you some anchors there within these different categories. And for posters and pictures, there are oftentimes collages of posters and pictures within classrooms. So if they post their artwork on the classroom walls, we would just count that one. So if there are 12 kids in the classroom and they all posted one piece of artwork, we would just count that one grouping of items as a poster or picture collage. You don't need to count those as 12 individual pieces separately. We also want to know if there is a garden available for use by the children in the center. And if there is, what's grown in it, whether flowers, herbs, fruits, or vegetables. And if it's fruits and vegetables, is there enough so that they can just have the kids taste them, or can they produce enough to incorporate into meals and snacks for those children? This often requires asking the teacher or director, because it might be in an area where you can't see or where they don't go outside. The next few questions are questions that you'll want to pay attention to during outdoor time, and if you don't go outside on any of the observation days, you'll want to make sure that you ask the director to step out and look at these different areas. So first we have what are more focused on natural landscape features. And these could be within the immediate play space, or it could be something that's on the perimeter. So if there is a fenced-in play space, but there are large trees just on the opposite side of the fence, we would count those as being part of the play space because it's providing shade and the perk of having a tree in that play space. Just because it's not in the direct fenced area doesn't exclude it from adding to the quality of the environment. We also want to know if the outdoor space has enough space for running games with more than half the class, less than half the class, those 4 different categories in H9. And similar to the indoor space, we want to know, does the outdoor play space have separate play areas for each age group, variety in group size, and accommodations for children with special needs? We also want to know how many play spaces there are outdoors, and these are either fixed or temporary areas where it focuses on one activity that children could do. So a swing set would count as a play area. A jungle gym would count as another. An open grassy area could count as one. And then teachers can create play spaces by putting in different portable play equipment pieces and things like that to create an area to encourage children to play in a different way than they might otherwise. So if the teachers create an obstacle course with a portable tunnel and some hula hoops and a couple of balls, that would be an additional play space that was temporary, but a play space nonetheless. We also want to know how much of the outdoor play space is shaded by trees or other structures that are man-made, such as a porch umbrella or a porch overhang or an umbrella, or tarps that can be hung from different anchor points. H13 and 14 ask about different pieces of fixed and portable play equipment. And what we're looking for here is within each category, are they present and are they used on the day that you are observing the classroom? So for fixed play equipment, that's what we're looking for there. For portable play equipment, what we're looking for is the total number, both indoors and outdoors, reported separately, and just use of the outdoor version of those. So we're kind of prioritizing where we think that these might have the biggest effect on children's activity levels. When we're looking at different pieces of equipment, especially thinking about fixed equipment, you can count multiple categories within one piece of equipment. So if there's a big jungle gym and it has a few slides, a climbing structure, and then a big platform in between, kind of like a small stage, you can count those as the three different categories where they fall in H13. So don't be afraid to count multiple things within one multi-purpose piece of play equipment. For portable play equipment, what we're looking for, when you're thinking about portable play equipment, it's important to make sure that you have access to all the places where portable play equipment can be stored. So make sure that you're looking through all the different areas of the classroom and asking the teacher where there might be other pieces of play equipment stored, whether outside or inside. H15 asks about different pieces of media equipment, and this is definitely something that could occur across the center, that they might be stored centrally, so you'll want to ask about that. Also, when you're within the classroom, take note of, and just kind of walking around the center in general, take note of whether TVs are located in some classrooms, all classrooms, whether they're stored in a closet that teachers can access when they want to, or if there are just no TVs at the center whatsoever. That would be for use for children's entertainment. If they have a TV in the lobby or something that has, like a rotating series of pictures for promotional purposes, we wouldn't count that in this scenario. Also, we want to know if there are soda and vending machines on site, and if so, where they are in relation to where children might see them. And last, we want just a crude drawing of the outdoor play area. So this is not meant to be like a masterful piece of artwork. It's just kind of more of a schematic to say, there's a grassy area over here, there's a swing set over here, there's a basketball hoop and a concrete area here, and there's a tricycle track that goes around the entire play space. It doesn't have to be particularly detailed, but what we're looking for there is almost a mapping of the different play areas that you're claiming there to be outside. So you would want to make sure that those two match up. The last section of the observation is related to food preparation questions, and it's a short section. First, we want to know if the center has a full kitchen or a modified kitchen, so just room for limited food preparation or just for storage of non-perishable food items. And we want to know if there is a full kitchen, if it's in the same area as the classroom, so if it's in the same building altogether, or is it on a larger campus where the food is coming from a kitchen that's 4 buildings over or something like that. We also want to know, specifically thinking about lunch, where that food is coming from. So is it cooked on site? Is it delivered from an outside source? Or do children bring their own food? And last, we want to know who is cooking or preparing most of the meals and snacks. So is that a designated cook? Is that the director, the teacher, a school food system, or someone else? So next we move on to the document review. And like I mentioned in earlier sections, this is something where you're going to want to remind the director that you need the documents for this probably a couple of times. And the very first page of the EPA or of the document review are those documents that you ideally would like to review. And just as a refresher, this is a review of what is written within the documents that you have access to. It is not focused on what you observe within your data collection visit. So leave everything that you observe to the observation and everything that you read within written documents to the document review. We also recommend that you complete this as soon as possible, either during the site visit or immediately following. If there are any pieces that you're missing within the documents that you had access to, it's easier to get the director on the hook for getting you those. And also everything is fresher in your brain as a data collector, so it makes it easier to complete this as you're going. And it's usually the case that you have to review some of these documents on site, so make sure that you're asking the director about those in terms of figuring out which ones you can take with you and which ones have to be reviewed by the time you leave that center. Again, as a reminder, the documents that you're going to want to review relate to policy and procedures manuals, anything that they give to parents in terms of a contract or a handbook, any sort of communication and education materials, if they have any child curriculum materials, documentation of playground safety checks. Menus will ask for at least one cycle, but the more that you can get, the better that you'll be there. And any sort of training materials that the provider has undergone, or even if it's just the certification document or the certificate that they get as part of completing their training, that would be acceptable as well. That's something that you're probably just going to refer to on site and then check that part of the document review. So the first section we're asking about here is related to parent education, and then that's followed by staff training. So first, parent education, you want to review anything that they give you. So this is more passive forms of communication like newsletters and handouts and emails, or more active communication with parents such as workshops or agendas from meetings that they might have had, or any sort of presentation documents, so slides, things like that. And once you review those, again, we're looking for things that happened just within the last year, and it's anything related to nutrition and physical activity. So we break the content of those out into different topics that map onto our best practices. And we ask you to look for the presence of those topics being covered in those education materials separately for workshops and meetings or emails and handouts. So again, that more active communication first, followed by that more passive communication. The next question is a similar question about staff training. So similarly, have they received any sort of training or undergone any workshops related to nutrition or physical activity? Here we're looking for, did they never receive nutrition training? Did they receive it, but it was more than a year ago, or was it within the last year? So first we ask about nutrition, then we ask about physical activity. And you'll see the topics that are listed in the nutrition section, so on page 3 in question 3. We ask if the training covered CACFP guidelines, just general food safety, gardening with children, different curricula that are common to the US, or whether it's more specific to serving sizes, creating healthy mealtime environments, things like that. For physical activity, a similar set of topics can be covered. So playground safety, similar curricula, and then different sorts of more specified or more nuanced topics related to children's physical activity. There are a few kind of miscellaneous documents that we look for as well. So have they gone on any field trips? And if they have, where did they go? So we're just looking at the 3 to 5-year-olds here, and where did they go on the field trips? Also, we want to know if there are any fundraisers that the center has participated in, and if so, what items were sold. So are these things things that include unhealthy foods like cookie dough and pizza kits and things like that? Or are they just kind of like wrapping paper or picture days? Or do they do some sort of event? A lot of centers will do like a fall festival to raise money for the center. Before we get to section B, though, just the very last question on section A asks if the center has any documentation that children had access to outside resource people related to outdoor learning and education. And if they did, we want to know if it happened less than one time per year, or 2 times per year or more. So the next section B gets into more of the specific policy documentation. And first we ask about the provision of food. So is this food provided by an outside company or facility? And if it is, are there written guidelines about what can or can't be served? And this is the case where the food is provided exclusively by this outside company. So the center itself is not providing any food to children. It's all coming from an outside source. The second question asks about the scenario where children are allowed to bring food from home for regular meals or snacks. And this is kind of the situation where one child would bring food from home to accommodate a specific need. So it could be food allergies, parents' preference, or restricted diet, something like that. This doesn't include things like holidays or celebrations, but is specific to kind of 1, maybe 2 children per classroom. If that is the case, we want to know if there are written guidelines related to what the parents can and cannot provide to children for their meals that they would eat within the child care center. There are some centers where if there is a food allergy, the center still requires that or still will provide food to that child. They will just make special exceptions and work around that child's specific needs. But there are some cases where if the child can't fit in with, or if the child's dietary preferences can't fit into what the center is already serving, then that is just at the discretion of the parent to bring in extra food or bring in food that child can eat. So we want to be thinking about those scenarios there. And the last question we ask in this first bit of section B is the case where food for meals and snacks are regularly brought from home. So this would be the entire class. So this would be the scenario where the center is not providing food for children, it's all coming from home. And if that's the case, we want to know if there are written guidelines that meals and snacks are supplemented with CACFP food components if the food brought from home does not meet CACFP standards. So if there is no fruit being served to the if there's no fruit provided to children from that meal from home, will providers within the child care center be able to add that in to that child's meal? Or the converse, are less healthy foods taken away from children's meals brought from home before they're served to children? So if there are cookies or chips or something, are those taken out of that child's lunch before it's served to children? The bulk of the rest of section B and the bulk of the document review is asking about specific nutrition and physical activity policies. So this is page 7 to 12. We start with the nutrition policies, then move on to the physical activity policies, and they're grouped according to our Go Knapsack best practice content area subcomponents. So you'll see some natural grouping of similar items there. And what we're looking for here, overall across both nutrition and physical activity, is the strength of the policy. So whether this policy was, or whether this topic was not mentioned at all, whether it was mentioned, or whether it is mentioned and specified such that it's fully covered, is what we call. So fully covered is the scenario where what's in the policy language meets our best practice standard. So for instance, if the policy language says that fruit is served every day to children, we want to give them credit for being mindful of the fact that they should be serving fruit to children. But if you look at 4B on page 7, our best practice standard is serving fruit 2 or more times per day, not including fruit juice. So if the policy language says we will provide fruit every day to children, we'll give them credit for mentioning fruit, but we won't give them credit for having the topic fully covered. So in that case, it would be that second option, topic is mentioned. If instead they said we serve fruit twice a day at least, or if they said twice a day, we would consider that the topic being fully covered because the strength of their policy language matches our best practice standard for that content piece. Additionally, with the foods and beverages served, we are looking for whether or not this is reflected in the menu. So you'll need to review the menu and determine if these things maybe aren't mentioned in the policy language, but the center is already implementing these practices, so we can give them credit for things being reflected in their menus as well. The last few questions are related to the menu and some other menu review items. And what we're looking for here is first, look at the lunch menu or the lunch meal and see how long it takes before the lunch meal is repeated. And what we call that a menu cycle. And with that, we're looking for just generally how long it takes before meals are repeated. What I usually do is just take note of how often I'm seeing similar meals, and if I'm seeing them every week. So if pizza is always served on Fridays, then it's probably a weekly menu cycle. But what you need to do is you need to have several months of menus to be able to identify this, because they could have like a 6-week menu cycle. And if you have just 2 months of menus, you're not going to really be able to determine that. So in that case, you can indicate that that you couldn't identify a lunch menu cycle. And what we're looking for here, oftentimes it's the most common repeat of a lunch meal is how often the lunch menu cycle is. We also have 3 additional questions where we would like you to review 1 month of menus and look at how many times the same food appears, or how many different types of food appears. And then we ask a question about seasonal food. So first, that second question, how many times does the same food appear on menus for fruits, vegetables, and whole grains? So this is thinking about repeated exposure to the same food. So if we're looking for here, we're looking for the scenario here where the same food appears multiple times, but we only want to count that food once. So if apples appear 3 times on the menu, you can mark 1 under fruit or give them credit for 1 repeated exposure to the same food. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same preparation. So if it's carrots served raw or carrots served cooked, those would be still the same repeated exposure to carrots, and we would give them credit for that. Question 3 is asking about how many different types of food. So if you had apples on the menu 3 times and oranges twice, that's 2 different fruits that are being served to that children, so you would mark 2 under fruit. And last, we want to know whether the fruits and vegetables that are served to children are seasonal, and whether that's whether more or less than half of those fruits and vegetables are seasonal. And for this, you'll want to refer to a local guide of what is considered seasonal in your area. Within the documentation for the user manual for the EPAO and document review, I provided a sample of what we refer to in North Carolina. A lot of times the cooperative extension folks have a nice guide of what's considered seasonal based on the month. So you can refer to a local guide there. And at that point, or at this point, that is the end of the document review, and you can continue on to the last part of the training next.